it's Liza Sivek. And before we begin, I want to remind you that show notes and links mentioned in this episode can be found in my Facebook and LinkedIn groups called Marketing Myths and Magic. Obviously, it's free to join, and group members get bonus freebies, live Q&As with special guests, events, and I'll be there to answer questions and chat with you. Head over to Facebook, LinkedIn, or there's a link at lizasivekmarketing.com and be a part of the conversation. Okay, let's jump in.
Hi, magicians. Welcome back. This is Liza Sivek with Marketing Myths and Magic, and I'm really happy that you joined us again this week. Today, I have Brittany Stinson, who's this really lovely, bubbly woman that I like very much, and she is a strategy expert, more importantly, and I like very much what she says on her website, which is free your mind, get stuff off your plate, which is how I sell marketing outsourcing, right? Because we have so many things to do in our day, plus trying to learn new skills rather than just, delegate them to someone who already knows it. And that's just one example of all the things we have to do in a day to figure out how to keep our business moving forward, how to deal with threats, how to deal with opportunities, which goes directly to what you deal with, decision fatigue, which I think every business owner out there, when they heard that, went, yeah, right? So Brittany, welcome, and thank you for being here to talk about this.
Yes, thank you for having me. I'm excited to have this conversation today. I could geek out on these topics all day long, so I'm excited about the conversation we get to have. I've been in such a variety of roles in my career. So I've worked at hospitals, I've worked at churches, I've worked as an entrepreneur, and I've worked for entrepreneurs for over the last 10 years. And so I've gotten to see this really interesting view of being the one in charge and also being the supporting role of the one who's in charge. And so it's helped me to see that, like everyone's leadership style, it's so different. Everyone is so different, and our personality comes through in the way that we lead. And so sometimes, depending on what we've got going, like internally, we absolutely can let things stack up, and maybe we can avoid or lean into things that feel a little bit easier to move through than others. And what that looks like sometimes in terms of how it builds up in your planner is just this like massive list, and it feels like a mountain. And actually, I had a mentor give me a book a long time ago, and I don't remember the name of the book, but I remember it said something like, eat the ugly frog first. And that always stuck with me. And so when I sit down to do something, do anything in a day, I'm like, man, okay, do I have any ugly frogs that I need to eat that I've been avoiding? And it's kind of gross, I guess, when you think about it.
It's a great visual. I keep thinking about, how you have to kiss a lot of frogs to find your Prince Charming. So that's what you do with the frogs that you kissed and didn't turn into anything, I guess. Right?
Yeah, you just eat them.
Ugly frogs. No, I think that's a great visual, remembering the ugly frogs. That's easy to keep in your mind. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think we can all look at our list or whatever. It may not even be a task. It may be a conversation that we need to have, or something a little bit more, theoretical that we need to step into, but we can feel it. We definitely can feel what we're avoiding, and we can feel what is our ugly frog. And so I don't think that it's best to start every day eating an ugly frog. Like, I do think there are days where we need to start with some wins, but to know like, hey, they exist. And if you lean into them, and 9 times out of 10, at least for me, 9 times out of 10, the minute I step into them, they are not as big and ugly and hairy, scary as I felt like they were going to be. Even just yesterday, I texted, because I still work really closely with my husband. He's a public speaker and he has his own business. And so I'm stepping into some things, and I texted him. I said, please, do I have your permission to just not finish this? Like, we can find another way. It was like this big form, and I didn't want to fill it out. And he's like, no, we can't, we can't not do that. So I'm like, okay, I get my mind right, take a deep breath. I'm like, I get all like adjusted in my chair, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to tackle this thing I've been avoiding for like 2 weeks. And he's like, we have 3 daughters. And he's like, okay, well, I'll just take them to the park, and, you do your thing. And anyways, like he thought it was going to be this big thing. I thought it was going to be this big thing. I was done in like 20 minutes. And I stood up and he hadn't even left yet. He's like, are you kidding me? You were about to not do that. And, and that's all that it took. And so I think the same could be true for whatever we might be avoiding. I think if we just lean into it, but like I had to take a deep breath. I really did. I had to geek myself up a little bit. But once I got into it, I realized like, I'm fully capable of this. I can absolutely handle this. And then I breezed through it. It hurt a little, but it wasn't as bad as I thought.
With it, right? First of all, the minute that you call your husband that you're working with on a project together and say, do I have to do this? Can we get around it the other way? You know that you're calling your spouse. And this isn't husband, this is like any spouse. Do I have to do this? The immediate thing is going to be like, no, you have to do it. You know you have to do it. You're calling me because you know I'm going to tell you you have to do it. Or we would have come up with it already. But so that was a funny moment for me when I heard that. I'm like, yeah, I would never get that answer either. So we have a couple ways of looking at this from my past of being taught about APD, anti-procrastination day. And I have to like sit and have this moment where I'm quiet. I quiet my mind. And that's a little tough for me sometimes because I have so many things going on up there. And think, what's really bothering me? Like, what am I avoiding? Like, what's the biggest thing that pops right to mind that I've been avoiding? And like you said, 9 times out of 10, it's an easy thing. I just didn't want to deal with it, or I had better things to do. And it becomes this bigger and bigger and bigger thing in the back of your mind. And once you clear that clutter out and say, let me just do this, 9 times out of 10, it's way easier than you thought. And that 1 out of 10 is, it's a bear, it sucks, but you're so happy you finally did it because it's not in bubbling up in the back of your mind, making you feel guilty, making you feel like you're not productive, making you feel like you're behind. The minute you get rid of that, I mean, maybe you have something new bubble up, but for a little while, depends on how backlog you are, but for a little while, it's just like, okay, I'm back in control. So that's an important thing, not to avoid those. And some people are fantastic at not avoiding those. I'm sure you could attest to this. And some of us, me, are not. So like 600 tabs open, don't know where the music is coming from most of the time. So, you know, that whole idea of being able to just push away that guilt and that clutter and say, okay, let me just deal with it. You're right. It's so often a relief because it doesn't take as long. And I hope you either went to the park or your husband said, I'm going anyway. And you got to, you know, sit down with a book, but a cup of coffee with 3 little kids.
I got to cook dinner without 3 kids on my leg. So that was actually great. Yeah.
They weren't helping. Yeah.
Yes. Helping. Yes. They love to quote unquote
time of life, but also very, very fatiguing. So yeah, I think that that's such a great thing, the ugly frog, which is a lot funnier to say than anti-procrastination. And you know, it's kind of like my husband saying, you know, I always leave the pots to soak, air quotes, for last because they didn't fit in the dishwasher. And he's like, you know, if you just did them first, they'd be done. So I started doing that. I'm like, okay, that does feel a little better. I still don't want to do them, but it does feel a little better. So just having that feeling transport to your to-do list, which I bet you're going to cover this, tends to be this insurmountable, unrealistic list for most people when they start their own business, especially.
Yeah. Oh my
all these
gosh,
things I'm supposed to do, I have to do. I did a live video recently called Don't Live in the Shoulds. I don't live in the shoulds. You should be doing this because that's a big downfall. Just knowing that you have that one little tool, we just started the whole podcast with it. I just love the ugly frog fishing. So I'm going to stop talking about what you do so you can talk about what you do, because but that just struck me as like, wow, it's one of those things that's simple, but you need someone else to tell you.
Yeah, no, and I love that. I've struggled with, I've had seasons where I've gone through, you know, your self-talk is so big, and I've gone through seasons where everything is just, oh, I could have, or I should have, or I would have if this wasn't the case. And it's like, I don't really know how well that serves me. I think, you know, negativity is not a great motivator. It only works for so long. And you know, we can get stuck in that. And so to have a more positive version of our motivation, like, let's think about, like, you know, recenter, like, why am I doing this? What's the mission behind my business? Like you said, if you're just starting a business, you're full of things that you could be doing. And I'm sure that you started your business with this amazing giant dream of all of these people that you're going to impact and all this great work that you're going to do in the world. And then along the way, as you start to dive in, and especially for people who are very visionary, all of these other things come into your focus, and you're like, oh, I could do it this way too. And I see them doing it this way, and I see them doing it this way. And then you just
syndrome. Yeah.
Yes. And you just
sparkly squirrel. Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
And so I think that's funny. Something you said earlier was, I think, was really profound about like when you just sit and you quiet yourself, you do really know why you're doing what you're doing. And I think if we believe and we trust ourselves, and we trust that we know ourselves enough to know where this is coming from, like whether it's my motivation or my avoidance, I really do know myself enough to say like, okay, this might not feel good that I'm feeling this way. This might not feel good that I'm doing what I'm doing. But if I can acknowledge it, at a minimum, I can acknowledge it, feel through it, and then make a choice from there. I think that's really big. I think self-trust is definitely something that I've been working on a lot over the last couple of years. And in getting in that support role for so many years, there are certain leaders who will allow you to speak up. They will allow you to have your own opinions. Certain leaders are a little bit more insecure, and that they really just want to know that you will say yes. And so being with different people at different points in my career, I think I've softened my voice a little bit, and I'm coming back into this place of saying, no, I know what I'm talking about. I really know, like in my gut, I can feel and I can know that this is a good choice. And so I think we do all have that self-trust within us, and we can, the more we lean into it, pay attention. It's like a muscle, you grow your muscle the more that you work it and you use it. So self-trust has been a big one for me over the last couple of years, for sure.
Yes, when you're used to aligning your opinions and your actions to move a business forward with what the boss wants, especially in an administrative role. Having been an executive assistant and, other kinds of people right below the owner or the boss in my past in marketing and other roles, I learned quickly and still use this. The administrative support network can tell you a lot more about a company than you would think when they talk. Mm-hmm. There's a huge network. And if you have never been in an admin position and you are a boss, it's kind of like watching Downton Abbey, and all the servants of the whole town know everything that's going on and can tell everybody how things are going and what should be done and what's missing and what they should have done. And they could see the mistake coming clearly. Admins don't know everything about the business that the owner might, or a director or manager might, but they can see a lot and they have ideas, and it's a big resource. So having the ability to see both sides of that, like you said, like you do, that's a huge thing, because not everybody has that opportunity. Not everybody gets to be the support and the leader. So it's a very good perspective to have from both sides. I think that's a very valuable thing for you to recognize. I think that's great that you have that. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's some of the work that I'm really excited to step into. So strategic consulting, strategic planning is definitely I love that. It's one of my sweet spots that I love to do. Like I tell people, if you just give me like a giant empty whiteboard and you give me like all your stuff, just dump out all your dreams, all your ideas, even the like miscellaneous ones that are like, I know that I have to go return this pair of jeans to Target, like whatever, just give me like all the stuff. And we just get it all out, and it's on this big whiteboard. And then we just start to like, there's this scene in the Avengers when Iron Man, like he has his like smart board